for joining me today, everybody. Today on the show, I've got Susan Tyson, fractional CMO, here with me. And Susan, you are in Chicago as well, right?
I am in Chicago, yes.
All right, then I'm going to ask you a Chicago-related question to start us off. What is your favorite thing to do in Chicago when somebody from out of town comes to visit? Do you have a thing you always take them to do?
You got to go down to the lakefront. You got to go. There aren't that many big cities that have a lakefront that's, 40 miles of beach that we have. We go down to the lakefront. Yes.
Amazing. Yes. Yeah, I'm 100% with you. That and the architecture tours are the two things that are kind of like understated gems, maybe. Just like when you come from out of town, just go do this. Pizza, you take it or leave it. Depends if you like pizza. That's a different thing.
I agree. Pizza, take it or leave it. But you got to do, and you're right with the architecture tours also. If you can get on the boat, there's that, the architecture tour that goes down the Chicago River. It goes south. It's really, I'm due for one of those. I haven't been on one of those for a while, and I find every time I go on one of those architecture tours, they're managed. The docents are all volunteers, and I learn something new every single time I go on one.
Yep, they're fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we could chat about more Chicago stuff if we have time at the end, but we will get to what you actually do. So tell us about your work as a fractional CMO and how you got started in that, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Sure. I work with small businesses. I prefer working directly with the owners of small businesses. I specialize with B2B businesses. And what I found is many of these owners of small businesses are really smart people. That's why they've got their business. They created their gizmo, their thing. In my ICP, I say Bob has created a specialized water pump and filter that he markets. But they got into business because they're excited about the thing, not about marketing. They didn't get into business because they wanted to be marketers. And but they're willing to try things because they're really brave. And that often is when I can help them get out of a pickle, when they get into, try something and I can help them back out again. But I've also found that there's far too many marketing people that working with these owners of small businesses, they take the trust me route. And, again, these business owners didn't get to where they are by just trusting any old Joe off the street. So there's a big component of trust you have to build with these owners of small businesses.
Yeah, that's an interesting, and this is true of most service-based businesses, right? Is like a big part of the sale is basically getting them to trust you. What are some things you find are helpful when it comes to getting a small business owner to trust you with taking on some marketing projects for them?
Oh boy, it's just I just need to be straight with them. I'm not very good at marketing jargon, as you'll find out as we talk more. I'm not a poet. I tend to be pretty direct and straightforward in what I say. I'm not a big fan of the latest bells and whistles that are out, the latest bright shiny object. I much prefer the block and tackle kind of marketing, the basics. Having a good website, clear and direct email marketing, sales materials that make sense, customer support communications that follow the brand strategy. Heck, just having a strategy. That's another thing that I found. You've probably experienced it too with companies that they just don't want to, bother with that messy stuff like strategy. Let's go and do fun stuff instead. And yet the strategy is so critically important.
It's so funny that you say that, because I was just talking to somebody about this, and I was asking them about their marketing strategy just out of curiosity, and they basically listed two tactics that they were trying. And now you and I know what tactics are. So we that is a way to execute a strategy, which is great, but tactics are often, confused or conflated with strategy. And so, when I ask them their strategy, they say, well, we're going to get active on social media. We're going to, send people follow-up emails after calls and people internet work. I'm like, that's not a strategy. That's just like two things you should just baseline be doing all the time, right? Like, so yeah, that's an interesting observation.
I'm not busting owners of small businesses on that one. I've worked at way too many big companies where the president of the company will stand in front of the organization every quarter and talk about what their strategies are, and then he cites the sales goals. It used to drive me crazy. That's one of those things that I used to think that it didn't happen in big companies, but it's far too prevalent that they just want to skip the strat. In fact, I created, and I would need to dig it up to share it with your audience if they'd be interested. But I got so frustrated that people weren't doing a strategy that I created a one-page strategy template. Just a single page PDF that if you can fill in the blanks and complete that, you've got the basic strategy in place. As I said earlier, I'm not into jargon. I'm not into poetry and all that fancy stuff. Your strategy doesn't need to be in a 1-inch binder that goes up on your shelf. It needs to be an active document that it just kind of sets the rules of the road.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Well, let's put a pin in marketing strategy and fractional CMO work, because we're going to talk a lot about that. I'm curious though, for you personally, what got you started on your own? What was your journey to draw you out to coming and working with small businesses?
10 years ago, I started as a consultant. I'll be honest, I was laid off. I was in a small agency, and I was brought on board to help with onboarding new clients. And after about a year, they realized they weren't getting new clients. So, so I've been doing it independently for about a year, or about 10 years. I was originally positioning myself as a independent marketing director, kind of switched it around into fractional CMO in the last 8 months or so.
Cool. You've written a couple of books about small business marketing. I know you're working on updating one of those, so we'll put a link in the show notes when that's out. But give me a little bit of background on those. What were the things you saw, and what did you end up writing in the books you have out?
My basic book is called Business Marketing Strategy, and I have it here. Oh, we got a copy.
There you go.
It's still this is a draft that I did. It is as I said, it is going to be revised when it comes out. The title will be Marketing Without the Nonsense, a no fluff guide for owners of small businesses who want to get it right. And the book, it came out of those same thoughts that I had, that business owners are very smart. They don't trust me. They want to understand what marketing is, what it is that we're going to be doing. They want to understand it well enough so that it makes sense to them, but they don't necessarily have to know it well enough to be able to do it themselves. And so Business Marketing Strategy, or the soon to be titled Marketing Without the Nonsense, it takes a business owner through the basic steps in a marketing strategy to help them understand not only what's involved with doing a strategy, but why you need a SWOT analysis, what the benefit is of specifying your mission and vision, why writing down your target audience profile is so important, what your brand tone, defining your brand tone, your brand, all of that is included in the book.
One of the things that you're saying all this, and I love all this stuff because it's these fundamental marketing things that you have to at least spend a little time thinking about. Again, you don't need to spend like 30 weeks doing this, right? Like these are small business owners. We all move fast. It's usually living in the owner's head. They can usually pull it out in a day or two if they're this one. But the hard part is, I find one of the hard parts is getting them to lock into a specific market and problem their tool or product or service solves. Like often they just want to say, well, it's kind of a little for this, a little for this, a little for everybody, a little for that. How do you pull it down out of them?
Yeah, our audience is everybody. Yeah, it's really just you've got to get them. I think it goes back to the trust. You got to get them to understand that if we can define that unique customer profile, that specific person, it is just automatically going to overflow to all those others. But you can increase your numbers by being very specific about who it is that you're targeting. And the other thing, Karl, that I found that I just find fascinating are how many businesses don't really know who their target customer is. They're happy to see those sales, but heaven forbid they should go into their customer base and do an analysis of what their customers look like. Oh, I know my customer. You don't have to do that part of the research. Yeah. Writing it down is just so important.
It allows you as a small business owner because here's the thing I always tell, the way I put it to small business owners is when you're small, you don't have the budget to compete with the big players. So let's say you've built a little widget that competes at a high level with any other big company's plastic widget out there, right? Because, let's say Honeywell makes a similar tool, but it's like, more mass market. Now you've got this little bitty thing. You can't compete with Honeywell on budget, on marketing, on brand awareness, like none of that stuff. So how do we compete? We go really, really specific with who this is for. And we get really narrow because then it's 100 potential buyers. They all show up to these 2 trade conferences every year. We know their email addresses. We find them on LinkedIn. Like it becomes so cheap and simple to reach them. And I'm kind of, I'm just saying this because I think you're bringing up the same point, which is like the narrower you go counterintuitively, the easier and cheaper it is to sell this thing repeatably.
Yes. Although I try and stay away from saying things like cheaper. But yes, the easier it is, more cost effective. Yes.
Cost effective, right? And again, like you can address a target market with a smaller total budget, which is a better way to put it. So you're a fractional CMO, and I think this is something that again, maybe a lot of people, because marketing, they don't know enough about marketing, they don't know what this term means or where you come in. Tell me about a typical typical case where you come in and help a small business owner wrangle their marketing and what your engagement typically looks like.
As a fractional CMO, my focus is on the strategy. My focus is on the strategy, on team alignment, on the high-level KPIs, and sharing my specific but still very broad industry expertise. So I usually start with a marketing audit. I have a process in place that for a qualitative marketing audit, looking at all of their customer-facing communications, looking for things like consistency of message, and branding across all their channels. With the small guys especially, they could have one person doing social and a different person doing branding and a different person doing their email. And over time, the messages all kind of start to slip. So that's where an audit can come in handy. But we start there with the audit, and then together we build out a strategy. Oftentimes it can take a good solid morning together with the business owner and perhaps their team, where we can go through again all of the basic elements in a strategy and just solidify that. The other thing that I can help with that I do is come in and manage the marketing team itself. So with these small businesses, they've probably got a couple of more junior people that are handling all of the tactics, usually doing a great job, but they don't have that strategic overlay. And so they just kind of keep doing the same things that they're doing. So that's one thing that I could take off a business owner's plate, is to go in and take over that management of the marketing team, and then establish the KPIs and the analytics is the next step. Again, that's one of the areas that, just kind of get pushed down to the bottom of the to-do list for an owner of a small business. And it's, again, for the same reason why you need a strategy. If you don't know what your goals are, if you don't know where you're going, if you're not measuring what you're doing along the way, you're not going to know that you're getting there. And then the fourth thing, and the fourth contribution that I can make, again, because of my broad industry experience, I can take a much different look on what their business is all about. I don't have the most linear career path. I have a kind of a wide range of businesses and companies that I've worked at. I've worked on the agency side. I've worked on the corporate side. I've worked in consulting, but my clients have ranged from Cars.com to Commonwealth Edison, the major energy provider here in Chicago, to Carson Perry Scott, the department store that used to compete with Marshall Fields. They were swallowed up by Target and all of that. I worked on Similac Welcome Edition Club, the infant formula. I've worked on Oldsmobile. I've worked on United States Postal Service. You notice there's no common thread. But that is an advantage, because I can call on so many different experiences and see similarities and be able to make recommendations for tactics and direction that we can take because of that broad experience. So that's the fourth benefit that I bring.
I love that. I have a strange and winding career path as well. And so I often find myself falling back on experiences I had back in college when I was a mechanical engineer and I worked at GE and Siemens, which is totally different from what I do now, right? And then, but you see similarities and you see certain things that worked and didn't, and the way teams function and the way the bureaucracy of these companies function, and just all that like knowledge kind of comes in handy in ways you wouldn't expect down the road, right? And I think that's a really cool advantage to bringing in consultants, is you get to absorb some of that breadth of experience without having to hire you full time or having to earn it yourself, which takes decades. I'll follow up on something else you said too there about, because I see the same problem with a lot of smaller companies doing marketing, is they tend to think, well, we have a marketing budget. Let's say it's $10,000 a month, so we can hire a couple interns to do social media and email management. That's our marketing. That's marketing. That's the whole thing, right? And I say exactly the same thing you said, which is, it's great you have tactical people. You need them. You've got to have somebody writing the social blast, whatever. Like, all that's got to happen. But like, that's not strategy, and that's not like you're ignoring the fact that some percentage of your budget there should go towards a strategic thinker who can sit with you and work with you to help you define these things and keep it cohesive as well. Like, I think is super important and often overlooked. And that's why I think most marketing is just pretty ineffective in small business. And
business owners, I found, oftentimes can be surprised when I work with those junior people and help to bring out other talents that they have, and other ways that they think about things, and other ways even just that they problem solve. So rather than giving them that very, very narrow direction that they have, we start to broaden it, and that creates some real excitement in the department, and it gets people rocking and rolling, gets them more enthused about doing their jobs.
Yeah. I mean, that's again one of the big perks to hiring experienced people, whether it's fractional or full time, is that they often bring out more in your more junior people than you knew was possible. And I've seen that personally in my career, and I've seen it through clients and friends of mine that have hired good people. It's again a multiplying effect that good senior leadership and consultants can have when they're put in the right places.
And it's great fun to do.
Yeah, it's very rewarding. Yeah,
It is
absolutely.
great fun to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
often say this. My wife and I both manage people now, and so we have these kind of comparisons. Her job is very different than mine. It's a big company in the healthcare, but it's still like just the being able to mentor and manage somebody and see them flourish, and then excel and exceed your expectations and what they had initially done is just so fun and rewarding. And like there's nothing like it. It makes you I have those days and it's like, man, I feel like I did something today. I let this little birdie take off, and
Yeah.
there they
Yeah.
are.
And one little story. Years and years and years ago, I worked at Chicago Sun-Times, the newspaper here, and I mentored a young woman there. She was just like so green, right out of college. And we just stayed in touch through the years. She's a vice president of a university in the Chicago area
Wow.
now.
Yeah.
So it is, yes, it's very much fun to watch the growth.
Yeah. You mentioned another thing that you usually will start with an audit, which I think makes a lot of sense because it kind of orients you around the business and what they're doing well and what they're not doing well, and probably brings to light some of those issues to the owner who's hired you ostensibly. So give me some of the pitfalls or things that you tend to see businesses missing and where you bring to light in those audits. I imagine there's a range, but what are some of the 2 or 3 most common things that come up?
Broken links on a website.
Sounds simple, but yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I've had clients surprisingly admit, well, yeah, we just put it together. We haven't touched it since it was put together. And you and I both know links seem to just mysteriously break. Poor communication on a website, kind of missing the call to action that needs to be more frequently on a website. And the other thing that I recommend anybody that I work with when it comes to websites is they're too often, they're shy about including photos and bios of the principals of the company. I need to remind these business owners that people like doing business with people. And you've got, you're not your company name, you're still, John Smith. You need to identify and include that on there. The other, as I said earlier, the other thing that I noticed in an audit is the inconsistency of the messaging. If they've established their tone and their voice, again, with one person doing website, one person doing email, another person doing social, it kind of gets watered down. So it's a time to strengthen that again. And I usually bring in a colleague that's an SEO specialist. And that's another thing that we looked at. Another little pet peeve that I'm trying to get the world to understand is it's one thing to have a website. It's great that you worked with that company and created a nice looking website. It's very handsome. A couple of changes here and there will strengthen things up. But if you don't have a SEO strategy behind it, nobody's going to see you. It's like building that really nice house on the new street over in the new part of town, but you never notified the post office where you are, so you never get mail. Nobody's going to find you without good SEO, and that's something that's so critically important now. The other thing I see has to do with the branding and just the consistency there, that losing sight of the fact of how important your logo and the tone and the actual language that you use is the same across all of the different channels, so that people can recognize that it's you. I always use Target as the example. Target no longer even has to use their name in their TV commercial. All you just need to see that, and it's almost now to the point where you could just tell by the look and feel that it's Target. I worked with a guy that was a graphic designer, video producer, and he had a different logo for each channel, which is very creative, only it's very confusing.
Right.
So that's the other thing that's yeah.
Yeah, Target is a good example here of the importance and the power of brand when done right, I think, because you're right. You could look at, like, literally my son who's 5 sees a truck with a Target on it, and he just goes, "Hey, that's like Target, the store." Like he just immediately assumed that's what it was. I don't even, it doesn't even have to be, but any Target, and he sees it, and that's it. It reminds me of, like, don't wear a red polo shirt into a Target store because
oh goodness,
they're so consistent with that's what every employee wears. You will look like you work there.
Yes.
You'll get a million questions. But
you better tell people where the toilet paper got moved to, or you'll be in trouble. Yeah, you'll get fired.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing you mentioned there is SEO. And this is something, with small business owners, often the challenge that I hear, or the pushback I hear on SEO, I agree with you 100%. I'm a big proponent of SEO, even if you have a small budget and a small brand and all that. Like, it's something that is super valuable in the long term. But how do you push back when somebody says, well, it's too saturated? There are people who, all the big competitors have already eaten all the big terms that I want to rank for. Like, SEO is not going to do anything for me. What do you say back to that, Susan?
You've got to do something. You've got to put something in place. It may not be. You need to use SEO strategy and SEO tactics to ensure you've got the right words in place, and you still can find, maybe with long tail search and things like that. You've got to just keep working that. I rely completely on my colleague that I work with, SEO specialist. I'm from Chicago, so I get to say it. I got a guy that is a specialist in SEO, and with all everything that Google is doing and all of the changes going on, Google is all about content. And the way that you can win, even as a small business owner, the way you can win the SEO game is with your content and having relevant content, and not, what's that word for jamming in all of the right keywords?
Yeah, keyword stuffing.
Yeah, that stuff. You don't,
No.
That's not it. You need to have good, complete information, good content. You need to have your titles at the tabs on the top of your website need to make sense. It needs to be words that people search for. If you you can't take and use your cute branded name in your titles up on the tags, because Google isn't going to know your cute special name. You need to use like real words up there so that Google can find you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other thing too, that I've heard is, sure, yeah, we put SEO in when we built the site. Right.
Yeah.
and that's great when you built it, but SEO is extremely dynamic. Google is changing things all the time. You have to stay on top of what's going on. You need a specialist, and it doesn't require some jargon-heavy, geeky guy to do this. It's a simple process that can be explained simply. Again, I got a guy if you want to know. But you must take a look at your the SEO in your results every single month and update every single month.
Yeah, you bring up another good point kind of tangentially here, which is by hiring a experienced fractional CMO, you get access to their whole network, right? Which so in, I bring on Susan and she's got an SEO guy. Great. Now that's my SEO guy. Essentially, getting to you don't, Susan, have to be an expert in every sub-discipline of marketing, right? Like that's not realistic. So instead, you've worked with a handful of people and I'm sure you know when to bring in the right people for the right things. And that's a super valuable thing because it's so hard to pick an SEO agency. I mean, like if you Google search SEO agency, you'll find 20 million results and they're all over the place and they're all over the place on quality. And so getting Susan's vetted list of like who to work with is fantastic and a hugely valuable resource. Again, another thing that bringing in experienced consultants really helps with in my experience.
And the same is with designers. I can bring in a designer that's specific for what this client needs. Same thing with copywriters. Too many people think that now that we've got ChatGPT, they don't need copywriters. And I just I marvel at the skill of a good copywriter, and what great work they can do, and how well they can quickly get in and understand a client and come up with sparkling copy. Yes, I've got my group of people that I work with. When I work with clients, they oftentimes have some of their own, favorite resources that they work with, and I find a way of working with them as well.
Yeah, great. Let's talk about kind of pivoting just a tiny bit, but into more the niche of like marketing for agencies themselves. So again, I talk to a lot of agency owners on a regular basis, and it's funny, a lot of times they have this cobbler has no shoes problem where, the marketing agency owner has never done anything to market his agency other than like his own network and referral, that just happens organically. Is that an issue you see across the digital agency space when you work with clients or in your past experience working with agencies? And what are some of the other, mistakes or places where digital agencies tend to really miss the boat on marketing?
I would never recommend that someone write their own resume. I would never recommend a digital agency lead their own marketing strategy. Bringing in somebody like me that can give it a fresh perspective and kind of a new look can really help to energize the marketing for the agency. Pete, the agency owner, can think that their strength is obvious. Everybody can see that well, no, Pete, it's not obvious. Let's talk about it. Let's highlight it. And even in the channels that they use. Promoting on LinkedIn and using LinkedIn the right way. LinkedIn is such a dynamic business-to-business tool, and that's another thing that's just so important. Just posting for the business owner to post regularly on LinkedIn. A regular posting with LinkedIn can see, when LinkedIn sees that you post every Monday and Wednesday at 11 o'clock, their algorithm picks that up. They like that. LinkedIn also, because LinkedIn wants to see you, it wants to encourage dialogue and interaction. So your comments that you make on posts for business owners, sharing your experience, the algorithm views those comments almost on the same level as your original post. So that's another area that so often ends up at the bottom of the to-do list. And I would encourage digital marketing agency owners to up that game. There's some great AI tools out there that can be used on LinkedIn. There's one that I use called EvyAI, EVYAI.com. It's a Chrome extension, and it's fabulous for writing your comments. That's another whole that's another whole session that we could talk about.
Yeah, I haven't gotten into a ton of that LinkedIn optimization. That's really interesting. I do, though, to your point about bringing in an outside expert. I have always found it really helpful in running. I own 2 marketing agencies right now. Like, again, I like to have somebody from the outside come in and look at like how we're branding and how we're talking about what we do and how we present ourselves to clients, because I get that blindness of like, I see it every day. So of course I know what the answer is. And it's really easy to like just trick myself into thinking there's nothing wrong here. But again, outside experts, over and over in my career, I've just seen like the right ones can make a huge difference versus just thinking you could do it all yourself. So I think there's something there.
Even in the consistency of what you do, so that the consistency of your messaging, right down to your proposals, and just so that the agency establishes their brand, tone, and voice, and uses that consistently.
Yeah. We've talked about a couple channels now in passing. We've talked about, LinkedIn. We've talked about SEO. We've discussed kind of the more of the high level marketing strategy. What other channels are you seeing working in, especially maybe the service business space, the agency space, for finding clients? LinkedIn is a really good example because it's just so B2B friendly, and that's kind of what we're all there for. But are there other channels that you kind of recommend people exploring and thinking about?
You could look at some of the socials. You can look at Instagram, for example. I don't see Facebook as being a business, a place to find businesses for agency. I'm not really seeing anything specifically on Twitter or X or Blue Sky or those. I don't see those channels as being strong brand building opportunities. For me, my recommendation is really looking at LinkedIn and SEO, and as I said, maybe a little Instagram, depending on the kind of agency that you are.
Yeah, my approach to this, I think it varies is the problem. Like, I think a lot of times we want to get, and I ask this question because it is hard to answer, and I find it fascinating to think about. But often I want to get like, 2 answers that work for every agency, but that's never the way it works. The truth is our customers are all over. Like one of the questions I've gotten in a habit of asking, which has been really enlightening to me and maybe is helpful to other agency owners, is at the end of a sales call, I'll just ask like, what are some conferences, events, communities, or things that newsletters you subscribe to that you're really a fan of that do good work? I'm just trying to learn more about your field and your industry. Again, like kind of it does 2 things. One, it makes the client or customer, prospect, whatever, feel like elevated. Like Karl values my opinion on media and content and things to pay attention to, which is great for just building them up. But then 2, which is really what I'm after, is like understanding where people like you hang out. What are you listening to? What's influencing you that I might be missing? And I'll often come out of that with events and conferences, newsletters, and social, like little niche communities that I never knew existed. And I've always got a big list I'm trying to like get involved with or partner with or whatever. So something else that can be really helpful if you get in that habit.
I'm sorry, I didn't even think of those, but that's a good point. And we went through 2 years of nothing but Zooming, and at least in the Chicago area, I know we're getting back to doing more in-person events, so that's another area that's so important, and those are the areas I like. I know of a couple of just more social events where business owners can meet other business owners in a social setting, and I really encourage those.
Yeah. The in-person stuff is hard to, it was a tough couple of years there for those of us like me. I used to speak at conferences. I love that kind of in-person interaction stuff. And the 2-3 years of COVID, being locked down and not being able to do that stuff in mass was challenging. And I think a lot of people had to get creative and get digital, which is great. But at the same time, I think now it's like some of that is coming back, and it's, if that is your strength, if that's something you like to do, it's probably time to start jumping back in and figuring out where to go. But yeah. Susan, I have one final question that I like to ask that's always just kind of a fun one, but it helps me because I'm always building my reading list. Besides your own books, is there anything you've read in the last year or two that's been influential or you recommend to people or something that really struck you?
I pull out Building a Story Brand by Don Miller. I pull that out pretty regularly. It's a book. I don't think I've ever actually read it cover to cover, but it's a book that I like to scan. I like to look at that. I'm a little bit of I'm old and I'm a little bit of a traditionalist, so I enjoy also doing the same with like David Ogilvy's books. He's the founder of the agency, grew in fame in the 60s and 70s, and he's got just such great wisdom. I've done a couple of LinkedIn posts on his comments. I'm looking at my bookshelf right now. And there's another Donald Miller, Marketing Made Simple book that I've really enjoyed. And I've got a very, very beat up old book called Cracking Creativity by McKelko, which is also it's a fun book for when you need to be challenged to turn the prism and look at a problem a little differently. It can be very inspiring for something like that.
Awesome. I'm writing those down. I've gotten Building a Story Brand recommended to me a couple times, so I need to bump that higher on my list, I think. Yeah. So Susan, this has been really fun to talk marketing. This is my world. I love to, geek out on this stuff. And I really appreciate you lending some of your experience. Where can people follow up with you and find out more about your work or book a call with you?
I am at Susan at sgtyson.com. I have a website, which is sgtyson.com. I am most active, though, on LinkedIn, and I invite any of your listeners to connect with me. I love connecting with anybody who wants to connect. I just recommend that they put a comment to say that they heard of me through this podcast.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Susan, again for the time. This has been really fun, and I will hope to talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Karl. This has been fun.
Thank you for watching this episode of Retain Trust. If you like this one, give it a thumbs up and subscribe on YouTube. It takes 2 seconds and it helps others find out about the show. And if you have questions or suggestions for a future episode, leave a comment. See you next time.